Welcome to Storytime with Akka. This time we're going to be reading Beauty and the Beast. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how different the story is from current adaptations. Strap in, get nice and cozy, and enjoy! Beauty and the Beast by Marie Le Prince de Beaumont. There was once a very rich merchant who had 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters. Being a man of sense, he spared no cost for their education, but gave them all kinds of masters. His daughters were extremely handsome, especially the youngest. When she was little, everybody admired her and called her the Little Beauty, so that as she grew up, she still went by the name of Beauty, which made her sisters very jealous. The youngest, as she was handsome, was also better than her sisters. The 2 eldest had a great deal of pride because they were rich. They gave themselves ridiculous airs and would not visit other merchants' daughters nor keep company with any but persons of quality. They went out every day upon parties of pleasure, balls, plays, concerts, etc., and laughed at their youngest sister because she spent the greatest part of her time in reading good books. As it was known that they were to have great fortunes, several eminent merchants made their addresses to them, but the 2 eldest said that they would never marry unless they could meet with a duke or an earl at least. Beauty, very civilly, thanked them that they courted her and told them that she was too young yet to marry, but chose to stay with her father a few years longer. All at once the merchant lost his whole fortune, excepting a small country house at a great distance from town, and told his children with tears in his eyes that they must go there and work for their living. The 2 eldest answered that they would not leave the town, for they had several lovers, who they were sure would be glad to have them, though they had no fortune. But in this they were mistaken, for their lovers slighted and forsook them in their poverty. As they were not beloved on account of their pride, everybody said, they do not deserve to be pitied. We are glad to see their pride humbled. Let them go and give themselves quality airs in milking the cows and minding their dairy. But, added they, we are extremely concerned for Beauty, as she was such a charming, sweet-tempered creature, spoke so kindly to poor people, and was of such an affable, obliging disposition. Nay, several gentlemen would have married her, though they knew she had not a penny, but she told them she could not think of leaving her poor father in his misfortunes, but was determined to go along with him into the country to comfort and attend him. Poor Beauty at first was sadly grieved at the loss of her fortune, but, she said to herself, were I to cry ever so much that would not make things better. I must try to make myself happy without a fortune. When they came to their country house, the merchant and his 3 sons applied themselves to husbandry and tillage, and Beauty rose at 4 in the morning and made haste to have the house clean and breakfast ready for the family. In the beginning she found it very difficult, for she had not been used to work as a servant, but in less than 2 months she grew stronger and healthier than ever. After she had done her work, she read, played on the harpsichord, or else sung while she spun. On the contrary, her 2 sisters did not know how to spend their time. They got up at 10 and did nothing but saunter about the whole day, lamenting the loss of their fine clothes and acquaintance. Do but see our youngest sister, said they to one another. What a poor, stupid, mean-spirited creature she is, to be contented with such an unhappy situation. The good merchant was of quite a different opinion. He knew very well that Beauty outshone her sisters, in person as well as in her mind, and admired her humility, industry, and patience. For her sisters not only left her all of the work of the house to do, but insulted her every moment. The family had lived about a year in this retirement when the merchant received a letter with an account that a vessel on board of which he had effects was safely arrived. This news had likely to have turned the heads of the 2 eldest daughters, who immediately flattered themselves with the hopes of returning to town, for they were quite weary of a country life. And when they saw their father ready to set out, they begged him to buy them new gowns, caps, rings, and all manner of trifles, but Beauty asked for nothing, for she thought to herself that all the money that her father was going to receive would scarce be sufficient to purchase everything her sisters wanted. What will you have, Beauty? Said her father. Since you are so kind as to think of me, answered she, be so kind as to bring me a rose, for as none grow hereabouts, they are a kind of rarity. Not that Beauty cared for a rose, but she asked for something, lest she would seem by her example to condemn her sister's conduct, who would have said she did it only to look particular. The good man went on his journey, but when he came there, they went to law with him about the merchandise, and after a great deal of trouble and pains to no purpose, he came back as poor as before. He was within 30 miles of his own house, thinking on the pleasure he should have in seeing his children again, when going through a large forest, he lost himself. It rained and snowed terribly. Besides, the wind was so high that it threw him twice off his horse, and the night coming on, he began to apprehend being either starved to death with cold and hunger, or else devoured by the wolves, whom he heard howling all around him. When, on a sudden, looking through a long walk of trees, he saw a light at some distance, and going on a little farther, perceived it came from a palace illuminated from top to bottom. The merchant returned God thanks for his happy discovery, and hasted to the palace, but he was greatly surprised at not meeting with anyone in the out courts. His horse followed him, and seeing a large stable open, went in, and finding both hay and oats, the poor beast, who was almost famished, fell to eating very heartily. The merchant tied him up to the manger, and walked towards the house, where he saw no one, but entering into a large hall, he found a good fire, and a table plentifully set out, with but one cover laid. As he was wet quite through with the rain and snow, he drew near the fire to dry himself. "I hope," said he, "the master of this house or his servants will excuse the liberty I take. I suppose it will not be long before some of them appear." He waited a considerable time, till it struck 11, and still nobody came. At last he was so hungry that he could stay no longer, but took a chicken and ate it in 2 mouthfuls, trembling all the while. After this he drank a few glasses of wine, and growing more courageous, he went out of the hall, and crossed through several grand apartments with magnificent furniture, till he came into a chamber, which had an exceeding good bed in it, and as he was very much fatigued, and it was past midnight, he concluded it was best to shut the door and go to bed. It was 10 in the morning before the merchant waked, and as he was going to rise, he was astonished to see a good suit of clothes in the room of his own, which were quite spoiled. "Certainly," said he, "this palace belongs to some kind of fairy who has seen and pitied my distress." He looked through a window, but instead of snow, saw the most delightful arbors, interwoven with the most beautiful flowers that ever were beheld. He then returned to the great hall, where he had supped the night before, and found some chocolate ready made on a little table. "Thank you, good Madam Fairy," said he aloud, "for being careful as to provide me with a breakfast. I am extremely obliged to you for all your favors." That was part 1 of my reading of Beauty and the Beast. I hope you enjoyed it so far. The other parts will be coming out along the month. I found it really interesting how much more of a focus there was on the father's story in this original version. The only version that I'm familiar with is the Disney version. Already it's really interesting how different it is. It seems that mean sisters are a bit of a trend in old stories, from Cinderella to this. I found it really funny when the book kind of insinuated that Beauty was just kind of objectively better than her sisters. I hope the story continues to be just as interesting going forward, and I hope you had a really lovely time listening. In the meantime, if you'd like to listen to me read something else, I've also done a reading of Alice in Wonderland on the channel. You can look at that over here to the left. Otherwise, if you'd like to watch something else, you can look over here to the right. Thank you for watching. Good night, alcoholics.